Hey guys,
Hello.
sorry about the technical difficulties. Brian is out in the middle of the mountains. I'm just bringing people in here, but he asked me to, if I could, to administer this bad boy. So we will do our best to get all that situated. The guys that are just joining us right now, I apologize for the delay. Brian had asked me to run the meeting. He's in the middle of the mountains right now, trying to kill some elk, and with Michael Kane, and we had a problem logging in, and he had the verification code he needed. So anyway, we got the verification code, we got it going, and I appreciate you guys being patient. And what I'm doing now is looking for, there it is, the notes. And I just, we'll get started here in a second. Okay, we got a few more guys joining us. Again, just as a quick update, Brian is out there, so I'm going to be running the call tonight, or administering it, I should say, and appreciate you guys being patient and waiting. And we're going to get started by sharing the notes, and I would love if somebody could volunteer to read these, because I'm ready to like blow up with anxiety. So if somebody could volunteer to read that, that would be great as we get started. Just read a few paragraphs and then pass, and then we can have somebody else pick in. And then when we're done, after the few pages, we'll open it up for some discussion and go from there. Oh, go ahead, Jeff. You want to read? You got to come off mute there.
Okay, I'll start out.
Thanks, bud.
The top of the screen's kind of cut off, but in our last session, one of the things we discussed, oh, there we go. Life is difficult. Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled. And do you want to get well, Jesus, from the Bible? In our last session, one of the things we discussed was how complacency is our enemy, and how if left unchecked or unaddressed, it will crush any real life-giving energy right out of us. And I'm complacent. So how worthy is this for me to read this? The subtle and dangerous thing about complacency is that it's hard to recognize because it most often feels so good. We looked at the story of this guy who had spent 38 years of his life trying to get healed from some level of paralysis that had left him unable to walk. In his very brief encounter with Jesus at these mystical pools, in which he was asked, "Do you want to get well?" And the man's reply was anything but enthusiastic or eager. His reply to that question conveyed a level of resignation, victimhood, whatever, or flat out acceptance of never being healed and whole. It was the kind of lackluster response that we've all heard before, the one that expresses little, if any, genuine excitement, buy-in, energy, willingness, or enthusiastic participation. Kind of like when we might be feeling rather randy and we either hint about or directly ask our wife if she'd like to do it tonight. But the response we get back from her is, if you want to, I guess I can. Or, really? Tonight? Are you sure? Okay, if I must. You'll have to add the voice inflections yourself. I tried. But I'm sure you get the point. Complacency in his situation in life, but happy, I doubt. It has been 38 years. I'm sure that he had grown accustomed to it and I'm sure he had figured out how to survive and make it through each day, each week, and each year. His life was manageable and was pretty predictable. The guy's life was as good as it gets. At least that's what he thought. You want me to finish the page?
Yeah, sure.
It wasn't until he had encountered with the stranger, wasn't until he had an encounter with the stranger, but the encounter was really an encounter with himself. He was allowed to finally face his own self-limiting beliefs and his own self-limiting actions. It is important to recognize that this guy was allowed, not forced, to see what he truly believes. And as it is with us tonight, we are allowed to look at our own self-limiting beliefs and self-limiting actions. We are not forced to look, but rather privileged to look.
A little change of perspective right there. Anybody want to pick up where Jeff left off?
Sure, I'll do it.
Thank you.
So you may be asking yourself, as I might, why are you pointing this stuff out? After all, I'm not an invalid lying on some mat beside some magical pools in a country thousands of miles away being spoken to by a guy I've never met. And frankly, I'm pretty sure that I don't really need anything. Well, that's just the point. It certainly is much easier to acknowledge a need in our life when there are noticeable things that require some adjustments or corrections. When we have some glaring defects or character flaws or harmful behaviors, yes, that makes it much more apparent, though often no less easy to help them. Often no less easy to ask for help to get well. But when we look good on the outside, like my chainsaw, it is far more difficult to know we might need a tune-up. In those times, we're either not self-aware enough or courageous enough to get help. Even we know there are some things we need to fix. We might not know how to do this, so we don't. Or we look around and compare ourselves against someone else and realize that we aren't so bad. I know this to be true in my own life. I have a tendency to rest upon the work that I have accomplished and then think that I'm doing okay. I've done enough for now. I can take a rest. I'm all right. While I might not be actually comparing myself against other, I am not comparing myself or measuring myself against what I know to do and what I've learned. I'm falling short of the things I know I can do. I'm not living up to the goals, behaviors, standards, or expectations that I have set for myself. My performance is not up to the level that I'd like to see. Yes, if I were to rate myself, I'd likely give myself a passing grade, one that is acceptable, one that seems good enough, one that will get me by. However, when I begin going down that path, and that can happen a lot, I'm not just selling myself short, but I'm justifying poor choices or rationalizing lazy behaviors. When I start to lower the standards that I've set for myself, that I'm not just reducing my value as a person, but more importantly, I'm establishing an ever-increasing downward spiral of mental deception and depreciation that will lead eventually to mental, moral, and character flaws.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. Anybody want to pick up the next page?
Yeah, sure, I'll go.
Thanks, Dave.
It's all up to me. The standards that I set for myself are the ones I'm allowed to live up to. I get to choose. It begins with me. Do I want to become well? Well, I do, and I'm hoping you do too. How we will begin this process is by addressing the two questions that the man in our story, invalid of 38 years, was facing. What are my own self-limiting beliefs? What are my own self-limiting actions? For tonight's call, we'll spend a little time looking at our self-limiting actions. These are things that may be easiest to notice and the ones that we are more likely to accept and acknowledge. What might be a self-limiting action? Here's a few that certainly could fall into that category. My speech and or language I use, my use of time, my use of technology, my entertainment, my physical fitness, my rest, my social involvements or lack thereof, my use of resources, my mental input, my nutritional intake, my marital interactions. Basically, a self-limiting action is any external behavior that can get in the way of us maturing, developing, improving, or growing. Let me just
Hey, would you
finish.
mind keep going, Dave? Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
that's fine. Self-limiting actions are very measurable and evident to others. These are actions that can be seen by others, though they are not always visible at the time. Self-limiting actions prevent me from reaching my fullest potential and doing or accomplishing all that I'm on planet Earth to do. The last thing I'll mention about self-limiting actions, though we could spend more time on this, which may be a future series, is that not all self-limiting actions can be interpreted as harmful or destructive or even wrong. And in fact, some of these actions may even appear to be a noble action. It is when the things we do get in the way of what is better or truer or more accurately aligns with our values and purpose. So the question I ask is, do you want to get well? It's time to do something about getting well. And what I'm asking is that you spend some time thinking about what these self-limiting actions are, then write down what they may be. Yes, it will take some courage and effort to do this, but if we don't, we will be lying beside the healing pool for quite a bit longer than needed.
Thanks, Jeff and John and David. I appreciate you guys reading that. This couldn't be more timely for me. I mean, I just had what I would consider a major hiccup and had the opportunity to really have my support group and the guys that I put around me to really help me to acknowledge and recognize that. And I just completely missed it. You know, it's one of those where it's like, oh, I'm doing fine. And then I'm not doing fine, you know, and I've, I've used this before, and you guys have probably heard me talk about that, you know, Brian eloquently writes it down and does a great job kind of illustrating step by step. I'm good with like visuals, and I've talked about, you know, treading in a stream that's flowing down river, and that as I'm working recovery and I'm doing the things I need to do, you know, I'm paddling upstream and I'm doing okay. But when I get complacent and I stop the paddling, I can find myself drifting back down the river and getting used to not doing anything, you know, and that just that complacency. And it's probably the number one thing I struggle with. And I know, you know, early on in recovery, I would have been very thankful, you know, to struggle with complacency because I was struggling with stuff being thrown at me and, you know, taking fists in the chest, and, you know, the anger that my wife had was pretty intense. But I think there's another thing that I missed that I'm going to add to that illustration. And I think, you know, if I've surrounded myself with like-minded men that are in recovery, that have the same goal as me, you know, they're standing on the side of that river and they can see truly where I am, because to me, the river looks the same, and it's like, it's flowing and it's going in one direction. And you know, the men in my support group and are there to sort of show me the way. But if I don't, you know, scream over to them, say, hey, how am I doing? What's going on? Do you see any blind spots? Or I don't utilize those guys, you know, that's my own fault. And what had happened most recently was something that was probably about 2.5 years of basically a one-way text messaging stream that from one of the guys that I sponsor, I work with, he's a sponsee of mine. His wife was texting me like just anger and just spewing it out. And then she would just say, don't text me back. And I wouldn't, of course, but I mentioned it to my wife the first time that it happened. And I just said, you know, I feel so bad that this is going on and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, as time progressed, it kept coming. It was every month, every couple months, it was just, you know, she was sending these text messages. And I just chalked it up and almost compartmentalized it as, you know, this is just a guy's wife that's hurting and it's somebody I work with, and that's okay. Right. And it wasn't okay. It was another woman sharing intimate stuff with me that when I really started talking about it and sharing it with other men, you know, some of them are like, what in the hell were you thinking? You know, and it's like, I didn't see it, you know, and I didn't I didn't talk about it. I didn't, because I just chalked it up with, well, this is part of, the recovery process for this guy, and this is just what I do, and how wrong that was, and I just completely got myself back into an empty trust jar. I mean, maybe not completely empty, but I can tell you it was a huge chunk that was taken out. And this is coming up 6 years into recovery. So it's like, I just can't stress it enough how important those men are in my life that helped me to know that I thought I was paddling upstream, but what was happening was the stream was flowing faster than I was paddling, and got myself caught into an ugly situation that I had to own. And believe me, when it first happened, I was pulling out the flip charts and the laser pointer and doing my best to try to, to explain and sell my wife on the fact that what I was doing was okay. And literally within a couple minutes, it hit me as like, hey, wait a minute, I really screwed this up, and I've got to own this behavior. And she really helped me to see, and this is not her responsibility by any means, but she helped me to really see some of the misconceptions that were going on in my mind. So, I'm not starting from zero, but I'm certainly fell down the first flight of steps, let's call it. And I got to dust myself off and get back up and keep trying. So it couldn't be any better timing for me on the complacency side, because I think it is so important. But so let's open it up. If you guys have anything you want to share about it, doesn't necessarily have to be about the reading, but if there's anything you want to talk about or share, I mean, God, now's the time to see where you're at on the river, on the stream. So just feel free to chime in. But if there's a few guys that want to share, you can go to the reactions button on Zoom, and then there's a raise hand at the very bottom of your screen, and it'll do it in order so that you guys will pop up in order, and then we'll just call on each other and hopefully be able to help each other out. So thanks for letting me share, guys. Hey, Greg, go ahead.
You can hear me now. Yeah. So, I kind of had that same experience, I don't know if it's complacency so much as just you think you're better along than you are, and you may be, but your wife isn't there. And, it's kind of that trust thing. If you made agreements and said, I'm going to adhere to a certain behavior, and you don't adhere to it, it really can destroy the trust. I had, this is like 2, maybe 3 years ago. So it was maybe 4 years after D-Day, the whole bit. And I am a physician, so I had to go see a patient, and I had my PA, who's a female, ride with me to go see this patient at his house, which wasn't too far away. It was like maybe a 5-minute drive, and my wife wasn't in town. And, we had agreed that I would not have another woman ride in my car with me, or there wasn't time for me to kind of let my wife know. She wasn't, you can make excuses for it, but long and short, she wasn't around. I didn't let her know immediately when I was going to see this patient. And then like a day or two later, I didn't even think it was a big deal, but it was. And I told her about it, but she was, really upset. So you kind of, I guess it's not, complacency, but it's assuming, you kind of assume that things may be better than they really are, or you assume that your wife's healed more, or you're assuming that she trusts you more than you think, or you assume that you can trust yourself more than you think. So that's what you got to be, it's an awareness. Like, don't assume that you're infallible, or don't assume that your wife's gonna be okay with something, and some things you may not even think about. But I guess that whole biblical message, I think it's a matter of complacency. You're comfortable where you are, and like the paralytic didn't want to make a change because he knew what he had, but you don't know what life would be differently. So making changes, there's a lot of unknown, and that's uncomfortable. Getting out of an affair, it's uncomfortable because you kind of know where you are. You're stuck, but you don't know, the consequences of revealing, or what your life would be, how differently it would be. So we get complacent because we're comfortable because we know where we are. You don't know what things will be like differently. But the whole thing is I guess the message I got out of this is that you want to take great risks. Great men take great risks. If you look at the biblical men, David took a great risk. He was a little kid with a slingshot. He went and killed the giant. Big risk there. Abraham took a great risk. So great men take great risks. And that's kind of what I get out of that. But I guess we're fearful of failure. I think that's the paralytic, is that fear of failure. That's all I kind of wanted to say.
Yeah, well said, Greg. Thank you for sharing that and clarifying that for sure. Is there anybody else that wants to talk about that at all?
It's Mark. I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand on the thing, but
Oh, that's okay, Mark. Go ahead, and then we'll have Jeff jump in after you.
a couple things. I mean, that was really being honest with your wife to tell her about this, and that's really important. So anything that erodes our honest relationship with our wives erodes that trust. And then complacency can also be just not doing the little stuff that is on her bucket list, her priority list, or not realizing that she still has negative feelings, negative thoughts, flashbacks, and to check in even when it's not obvious that she's fallen down. Just that stuff, it's easy to get complacent at. And you don't really know. I don't really know, but I hope that stuff adds up. And sometimes the little stuff does really matter. But I think it took a lot of guts to be honest with her about it. And boy, she showed she's in your corner, because here she is with you, trying to help you. And obviously I think she wants, the same goal you want, a good marriage. So she's with you in this, and that's reassuring. It's good to hear. As
Yeah.
tough as it was coming clean about it and facing it and dealing with it. My wife kind of laid down ground rules. I know that, she said to me, 10 years ago, if you have a meal with a woman and I'm not there, that's inappropriate, for example. Like, because there are PAs, there are nurses where I work and stuff like that. So, the lines are kind of very clear. But it can be a slippery slope when you're trying to help somebody and then something like that pops up. But basically, I know if I had a texting relationship with some woman on my phone, she if I can't do it in front of her, then I guess I shouldn't be doing it. But not that, I have my issues and my complacencies too, and stuff that like you said, we all have a blind spot, or we think we're okay, and we're ignoring that blind spot. So a couple weeks ago, I had said to Brian on one of these calls, that's what I don't want to be, is complacent. And it's so easy to fall into that. So thank you for addressing it.
Yeah, and full and fair disclosure too, Mark, I just want to say that she had found it on my phone. I didn't necessarily come clean with her. So there's a mega fact there that I think was important. And she hadn't checked my phone in a long time, but and I didn't think I was doing anything wrong, because I had cleared the tower supposedly, but there was many other text messages that I didn't say, hey, look here, I'm still getting this. She would have shut it down. That's what she said. There's no
Up
way.
until I had a full-blown affair, there were other things that I did that, looking back, were very inappropriate, even if they didn't become a sexual relationship, an emotional thing. So, I had fallen down that slope several times, a couple times before, not to the extent of a full affair. So I get it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Jeff, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to speak up. Some of the guys that on my calls know that I recently stumbled pretty severely. My trust jar is pretty empty as well. But what I found out in talking with my wife, that it was more the little things that really screwed me up. Not owning what I did and just trying to sweep it under the carpet was definitely not the right way to go. So learn from me and don't do that. Lean in and embrace it, that you got to own our shit when we do stuff wrong. And I didn't in my case. I tried to avoid it. And that's really what set her back. It's just I wasn't being truthful with her, and I wasn't sharing, and I tried to avoid it. So that's really all I got.
Hey, Jeff, what, if you don't mind me asking, what were the little things that you mentioned? I mean, I know some of the guys are in your group here, but so the guys that weren't.
Just not owning it, so I didn't check in with my wife one night. I was out at a convention and I'd acted out previously at other conventions, so she was already kind of triggered. I didn't take it to heart really, and I didn't check in with her. And the next morning I woke up and went, oh yeah, shit, I should have checked in with my wife, and didn't. But then I just ignored it. I didn't call her. I didn't check in. And those are the little steps. Checking in is not a big deal, but it goes a long ways. Being truthful and owning that, okay, I stayed out too late and I said I wasn't going to do that. Those are the little things that really got me tripped up. Does that kind of explain it?
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate you elaborating that. Anybody else have anything they want to chat? Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, just kind of jumping on to, what the guys have already been saying. Just being self-aware is a really, and I sent a note to Jeff about it. It's next to impossible, right? So, Tom, to use your metaphor, you have to look down at the water, right, when you're in that stream, just to see which way it's flowing. And it's very difficult to do that all the time. My biggest stumbles are just transitioning from one activity to the next, whether it's coming home and walking in the door and just taking that 2 seconds to say, okay, I'm packing up and closing out these files on my desktop, and I'm now heading, opening up the one that says home or what have you. And that's really, really hard to do. I'm, something as simple today as putting together a recumbent bike for my wife. And I was just going to finish it tonight. And we agreed we were going to do it. And my wife was going to help me. And she finally said, okay, we're going to do that bike. And I just jumped up and said, yeah, let's go do it. But I wasn't in the right frame of mind. I'm still someplace else. And I was kind of an asshole. I wasn't any fun to work with. And she called me out on it afterwards. And, yeah, it's not the end of the world. It wasn't, it didn't lead to tears or, weeks of not talking to one another, but it was just another example of just being aware of where you are and what you're doing, and who you're talking to, what you're saying. And it's really next to impossible we try it, but we're never going to get there. But it's just trying to get better and better and better at it, and have fewer and fewer episodes. So I applaud you guys for sharing your stuff tonight, and just keep the faith and keep trying. It's all we can do.
Dave, do you mind if I ask you a question?
Sure.
So when your wife came to you and called you out on it, how did you respond?
Well, she asked, are you doing okay today? And I said, yeah, of course, I'm fine.
Fine.
I'm fine. I just, can we end the conversation, and can we move on and not address it? And I don't think I really have, now that I'm looking back at it. So after the call, I think I'm gonna bring it up myself and finish the thought and apologize for not clearly transitioning from, where I was and thinking about what my role was going to be and how I was going to be, letting her help and supporting, it's her thing. And, I kind of took over and was just a bit of a jerk. Now I look back at it, and I just feel badly about it now. So.
Well, good for you, and the courage, right, to go back to that uncomfortable room. Because I know for me, I would much rather just hide under the carpet and just let it go, right? No big deal. I'm just going to let it go. I think that's the big difference. I mean, if you had to rewind the clock to, before the affair, how do you think you would have handled that same situation?
Same way. Probably I would have just ignored it or just delayed, pushed it down the road, kind of like what Jeff was saying, and just make it worse, and I know I can't do that. I just gotta shorten that gap between, eliminate the delay between my action and my response, and eventually get to a point where I'm not doing that. I'm thinking about it, being proactive, thinking about it ahead of time. But it's really hard, it's something that just really struggle with, to be present and aware all the time.
It's like that $1 million second.
It is.
Just 1 second to take that breath before it comes out of the mouth.
I know, right? It's really hard, really hard.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Dave. I appreciate it. And Danny, I know you've been patient there. Go ahead.
Me patient?
Isn't that one of your blocks, by the way?
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say, it's funny you were just talking about that 1 second, because immediacy in these situations seems key. Like Jeff was saying, we waited till the next morning and then he still pushed it. And I don't know how much time, transpired between the text you got and when your wife found it. Or even Dave just saying, hey, can you give me 15 minutes? I'm not in the right state of mind right now. I'll be there as soon as possible or whatever. And I've found in those situations, like if I have a work event or an email or something happens that I need to let her know, the immediacy of getting to it sooner than later always seems to have a better effect than, pushing it off and waiting. And then you might forget something and then she'll find out something first, and you're like, oh man, I forgot to tell you that. And it just kind of comes back to bite you. So I definitely think that that's those seconds are in play when things like that go down.
Yeah, and I think Greg shared something earlier that I think bears repeating, and it's like that feeling that you're in a better place, like you're more trustworthy, and that may be the way we feel, but that first text message that I had the okay with, and then the second and third and the fourth, there was, well, she trusts me, I'm good, and as H1 occurred, I'm not replying back, so it's okay, and that's where like I'm not keeping her a priority, because if she's at the top of my list on this priority, I'm going to immediately react to do what I need to do to be able to, to be able to own that right away and say, hey, look, I got another text message from her, that if it's right on my mind and that's the priority. And I think you just touched on that too. Like there's this level of, if you're leaving the office, and it's been 4 or 5 years, well, I don't need to tell her that anymore. When she hasn't said, don't bother, you don't have to, that's what I need to do, is I need to let her tell me where her comfort level is, and leave it up to me, and I'm like, oh, I'm good, yeah, and our trust is good, so it's all good. So not necessarily the case, but good point on that one about the work stuff too. Steve, yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in too, kind of what Danny was saying around the immediacy, and in my situation, I think I've shared here before about how my affair partner actually applied for a position at the district in which I am superintendent, and immediately when that came in, I snapped a picture of the timestamp, everything else, sent it directly to my wife, told her exactly what was going on. We talked together about how to respond, what that would look like. And, I got a good job, pat on the back, felt great about it. But then I kind of stopped there. I compartmentalized, oh, good, solved the problem, did a good job, proud of myself, and went on. And, a few days later, my wife's like, so do you think that bothered me at all that she applied? And I didn't even engage in the conversation of, she had a lot more going on. That was a huge trigger. Now she's like, okay, your affair partner's now trying again. And what's her next move? What's she going to do? Where I was all proud of myself for, all right, I told her right away, I did the right thing. So it, it set us back because I didn't ask. I didn't get curious and ask questions, see what she was experiencing through that. So that's the next step, I guess, too. It's just to follow through with asking questions.
Yeah, and I think being immediate, but also being proactive, right? Like you didn't wait for her to see it. Like you went and brought it to her. And, I think that's the ultimate difference between, at least if I look at it from our two situations, that's where there's anger, there's despair, there's all those things that come out. But, if the distrust is there, it comes and goes pretty quick, I would assume, because there's that level that you didn't have to tell her that, but you did.
Right.
Being proactive like you did was very courageous, and that's great you did that.
Just got to follow through with now, how did that make you feel? Because she's think that I was taking credit for doing a good job, but never, I didn't finish. So I think that's.
Anybody else have anything they want to add to that? Oh, go ahead, John.
I appreciate this. I could have used this yesterday or the day before, just to remind me. So for me, it's as we're talking about these different things, it brings up in our small group, we talk about boundaries, primary boundaries and secondary boundaries, and one of the boundaries that I have in place is going on social media sites. Because that's where I got in trouble, where things went sideways. And yesterday, if we go back a couple weeks, new grandbaby born, and my wife was handing me her phone and showing me pictures that my daughter had put on Facebook. And so now last night I grabbed the phone and I'm just looking at the Facebook page and seeing what the grandkids look like for Halloween. Well, there was no pictures, but my wife walked in and goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm just looking at your Facebook to see the kids." And I never stopped to think that I just blew past the boundary. I took for granted what was already, something that was, here's. She handed me the phone and said, "Hey, here's some pictures of the grandkid," and I'm like, "Oh, that's cute." And I took that as a go ahead to just grab her phone and look at whatever I wanted. And I quickly found out how wrong I was. But as Steve was just saying, when I asked the question, I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't even think about that." And I said, "I can only imagine how you're feeling right now." And she goes, "No, you can't imagine. You've never been put in this position where you have to imagine." I'm like, "Well, you're right. And it's little things like that. I can grab my little trust bead jar, it's sitting right up here, and I got like 12. I'm down to 12. I was like, man, I had 15. Now I'm down to 12. Come on. But it's as I hear everyone talking, it's so true. One of the things that I said I'm working on is coasting, and here I find myself just coasting, and So this is timely. I greatly appreciate the openness of all the guys sharing, and for those of you that are just listening, know it's something that it's easy to fall into. We have to, and regardless of what our past failures were, as men of honor, we have to stay focused in who we are and who we want to be. We have to take accountability, for our actions, and we need to be upright and forthright with our spouses and with the guys in the group. So I just appreciate this is such a timely message. So thank you, Tom.
Thanks, John. So you mind if I ask you a question, John?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So what could you have done differently in that situation? Because I'm sitting here listening to you going, like, I could easily slip into that, because I'm same thing, no social media for me. What could you have done differently?
And that's easy. All I had to do was say, "Hey, hon, can I look at your phone? I just want to check and see if the kids put any pictures of their costumes." It would have been that simple. She would have been, "Oh yeah, let's take a look." And whether it was us looking at it together or her just saying, "Go ahead," but at that point, I wouldn't have been blowing past a boundary. She would have known exactly what it is that I'm doing. For her, when she sees me in that type of place, it's just bringing her right back to, me on social media. She's asking what I'm doing, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm just looking at stuff," but I'm in the middle of rampant sin. So it just brings her right back to that place. So just a quick, "Hey, you mind if I take a look?" or if we take a look.
So do you think in the first year of your recovery, do you think that you wouldn't even have, okay. I don't even need you to answer. I'm looking at your body language.
First year of recovery, I would have been eating that phone.
Oh, eating the phone. But do you think you would have pushed the boundary like you did?
No, absolutely not. No, because I was focused, and I knew that was, I didn't even ask the first couple of years to even look. She would show me something that she thought was important, but I didn't even want anything to do with it. So
Yeah. And I think, again, it's that kind of that what Greg had mentioned earlier again, it's like feeling like we're in a better
Yeah.
position. Here we are further along, yet making a mistake we wouldn't have made, in the first year of our recovery. It's like, it's
Right.
common sense in the first year, but years in, it's like, duh, I should have given her the phone back.
Absolutely.
That's the craziness. Anyway, so Mark, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. It's easy for me to fall into complacency on some of the things that my wife has said are important to her. Coming to bed at the same time, or coming to bed within 15, 20 minutes of when she goes to bed. She always goes to bed earlier than me. She poops out earlier. But if it's day after day, a whole week that I'm coming to bed at 11:45 and she's in bed at 11, that's the type of thing that can bother my wife. Or complacency with work eclipsing home, or work eclipsing my attention to her. Or am I just doing the stuff I have to do to get by in my relationship? Or am I really putting her first once in a while and saying, okay, yeah, that time I could use for studying, that time I could use for this or that. But if I put her first and say, hey, let's just go out for a drive and look at the leaves, the fall foliage, and yeah, that's prime time that I could be doing something else. We'll make it her prime time. And I don't do enough of that, but the little bit that I do in that direction, she usually recognizes. And sometimes that stuff does help. Not saying it bails me out if I'm really in a hole, but that stuff can add up too, negative or positive. So
Yeah.
And yeah, I can get complacent about that stuff. And if she says something, it'll be something I've told. She said, "Oh, I told you, you know, how many times?" And then the what you don't want to hear is, well, apathy on her part. Well, like I give up. I'm tired of telling you what matters to me. You know, you don't want to be in that situation. So
Yeah.
you never know, you're on thin ice until you fall through, though. So
Yeah, it's a very powerful point where you talked about the apathy. You know, we actually mentioned this at Man of Honor. You know, if they're angry, I'm sure there's guys here that are new into this that their wives are still very angry. But if they're angry, you're in the game. You know, if they're apathetic, like you just mentioned, that's when you really got to worry. So
yeah, yeah.
Nick, are you Nick?
Yeah.
Thanks, bud.
Yeah, I just want to, comment just on the whole thing about complacency, because that's, we're almost, 5.5 years, nearly 6 years in, and thought things were, kind of got to a reasonable place. But, since over the last month, after Man of Honor and committing myself to doing, a lot more reading, a lot more work on myself, which has been very evident to my wife. I mean, we've had, it's probably been the best month in the last 5 years. Really, it's just been, and it's been a very good month for her, to the point that, within the last couple of weeks, she found out one of her employees was an affair partner, which would have probably sent her into a bit of a spiral, a year or two ago. But she just, we talked about it, and it was, it wasn't, it didn't really trigger her, at all the way it might have a couple of years before. And she's also feeling comfortable enough that, normally she'd go down and visit our daughter, but she'd always come back. I have to work this weekend. She would go down and come back the same day, but she's going to go down and stay with her for a couple of nights and then come back later. So it's just, she's just, she just feels like, I didn't think that I was doing that much, but it's what little extra I'm doing has made quite a lot of impact, a lot of difference to her. And she's, so that's also incentive to try to keep focused and keep going. So
That's awesome, Nick. And it's a marathon, right?
yeah, it is. Yeah.
So it's like, you'll have some losses in between, and it's great that you can take those wins and really, bank them and just, remember that. Definitely remember that. Just for clarification, do you mind if I ask you a question?
Yep.
So your wife found out that a coworker of hers was your
Yeah.
partner?
No,
Okay.
not my
All
affair.
right.
No,
I
no.
didn't think so.
But she was an affair partner, and it was kind of a weird situation at work. She was getting her a door fixed in her office, and one of her employees was sort of like, oh, let me, I'll deal with the company, and I'll phone and I can get your deal. And she thought that was all a little bit kind of strange. And then she kept sort of asking if my wife got a discount, and, my wife then was phoned the company to sort of settle up with her bill, and that the wife of the owner of the company sort of, was kind of a bit frosty. And then it sort of turned out that my wife's employee, as she told her, had used to work for that company and had an inappropriate relationship with her husband.
Gotcha.
And so, but, it was her kind of trying to reconnect again with her affair partner. So, I mean, it was, it was a pretty significant thing. And definitely if this had come up, 6 months or 12 months ago, it would have been, she would have had a difficult time dealing with it. It would have been a big trigger for her. But it was, something we talked about, but, it was something that she dealt with, pretty well. And we talked about, how she should deal with her employee moving forward. I said, well, it's not, can't really, you know about it, but it's, as long as she's working for you as an employee, that's that's fine. And just don't let her deal with the door company anymore. That's all.
Yeah. Well, it's a testament to your wife's healing. That's great. Because I remember,
Yeah.
I never realized how many movies had in their subplots affairs until I had an affair. And then I couldn't watch anything. Couldn't watch TV. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
Every movie and every pop song.
Yeah, every pop song, right? Yeah. So is there anybody out there that's listening to some of the shares and saying, God, I wish I had those problems. I'm still in the heat of this thing. That's good. That means everybody's past the stage of, oh my gosh, right? Dealing with the day-to-day, minute by minute, right? Because I remember those days. It was a hard time. Hard time for her, hard time for me. Anybody else have anything they want to share? We got a few minutes here. Somebody want to check in if they're want to run something by the group? I'll take this time just to, were you going to share there, John?
I was just gonna say, excuse me, I appreciate everybody sharing. I don't know if you've noticed me looking down, I make notes, like pearls of wisdom. So, some of the ones that I haven't thought of is, I do check on how my wife's doing, but it's normally when I notice that she's quiet or a little bit off. So one of my notes is checking on your wife, even if she seems okay. Just checking in, seeing how she's doing, being present and aware. And these all came from different people. I can't tell you who said what. Stay focused on who we are and who we are trying to be. The one I kind of chuckled at was, you don't always know you're on thin ice until you fall through. So whoever said that, thank you. But I appreciate everybody sharing. So I madly make notes here.
That's good, John. Thank you. It's good to see you again too. But I'll just take these final couple minutes. So we're going to be prepping an email and sending it out. And I think most of the guys on this call, I think a handful were not, but we're at the Man of Honor weekend. We're going to be sending out an email with a survey link, and would really appreciate you guys checking in on that. We're going to have a major question on it this year that's going to talk about the future of the program from an alumni perspective. So we definitely want to hear from the guys that have been back multiple times, and what their thoughts are about coming back next year and what they would like to see. The other thing too is that we're going to try to coordinate. I know a lot of the new guys, in fact, 100% of the new guys that were there were interested in joining a small group. John, I know you were one of them. So we'll be following back up with you guys and reaching out to some alumni that have been there multiple times that might already have a group. I'm talking about like Jeff Mitchell and Greg Laura, who have like 50 groups, or 4, that's exaggerating, 3 or 4 groups, but maybe guys that are in one group that want to potentially start to give out to maybe some new guys and branch out to a second group. So we'll be gathering some of that information, and I promise we'll get to your feedback, or not your feedback, your request that you wanted to get into a small group, and we have a few ideas that we're going to kind of put together, and so if you want to respond to that email, that would be great, if you're interested in creating that. So I would expect that probably in the next week. And again, we'd really appreciate it if you guys took the time to do that. And again, thank you for taking your time out of your day to be here with us, or night, I should say. Could be day for West Coast guys, but we really appreciate your time. And Brian wishes he was here. And the bad news is, if he wasn't going to be here, it's because he didn't kill an elk. So I guess he's 0 for whatever he was during the week. So anyway, I'm sure he'll be here in 2 weeks and cranking it back up for the 3rd portion of the series that he's in right now, which is the Life is Difficult from Scott Peck. So stay tuned for a couple more weeks and keep an eye out for that email. Thanks, guys. Have a great week.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Good job tonight.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
your help too.
Yeah,
Yep.
thanks, Tom.
Take
See you
care,
guys.
guys.
Yeah, you guys.